If I were to tell you that the most significant military and economic victory of the 21st century didn't happen in a desert in the Middle East or on an island in the Pacific, but just a few hundred miles off the coast of Florida, you'd probably think I was exaggerating. You'd be looking for the smoke of a battlefield. But if you want to find the true center of the new Cold War, you have to look at a country that possesses the world's largest oil reserves and is currently being turned into a high-tech satellite state for the Chinese Communist Party. Most people see Venezuela as a tragic story of economic collapse and political chaos, a failed state that the world has left behind. But in Beijing, Venezuela is seen as something else entirely, the ultimate strategic bridgehead. It is a laboratory for social control, a bottomless gas station for the Chinese military, and a permanent dagger pointed at the soft underbelly of the United States. Welcome to the hidden reality of the South American endgame. This is the dangerous reality of China's strategic victory in Venezuela. To understand why this is a victory, we have to look at the oil for debt trap. Venezuela sits on over 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, and more than the United States. But Venezuela's oil is heavy, expensive to refine, and the country's infrastructure is in ruins. This is where China stepped in. Over the last 2 decades, China has funneled over $60 billion into Venezuela through a series of commodity-backed loans. The deal was simple. China provides the cash to keep the regime alive, and Venezuela pays it back in crude oil. But the math was rigged from the start. As the Venezuelan economy collapsed and oil production plummeted, the debt didn't go away. It became a permanent mortgage on the country's future. Today, Venezuela owes China billions of dollars that it can never repay in cash. Instead, China has effectively taken control of the country's most valuable assets. Chinese state-owned enterprises now have a direct hand in managing Venezuela's oil fields, its refineries, and its export terminals. China isn't just a customer of Venezuelan oil, they are the landlords. In a global conflict, China doesn't need to fight for energy. They have already secured a private supply in America's backyard. The vulnerability is not a lack of oil, it's the fact that the world's largest reserves are now being managed from Beijing. And then there is the fatherland card, Carnet de la Patria. This is perhaps the most disturbing part of the victory. While the world was focused on Venezuela's hyperinflation, China was helping the regime build a digital panopticon. Working with the Chinese telecom giant ZTE, the Venezuelan government implemented the Fatherland Card, a biometric ID system that tracks everything from a citizen's medical records and social media activity to their voting history and their access to government food subsidies. This isn't just an ID card, it is a Chinese-style social credit system exported to the Western Hemisphere. It allows the regime to reward loyalty and punish dissent with surgical precision. If you protest, your card is deactivated. If your card is deactivated, you don't eat. China has used Venezuela as a testing ground for how to sustain an authoritarian regime in the digital age. They have proven that you don't need a popular government to stay in power. You just need Chinese technology. By securing the survival of the Maduro regime, China has secured a permanent, loyal ally that is indebted to them not just for money, but for its very existence. The vulnerability is not a lack of democracy. It's the export of a surveillance model that makes democracy impossible to reclaim. Open loop. But the oil and the surveillance are only the foundation. The most dangerous part of the victory is the military and intelligence encirclement. For years, the US has dismissed Venezuela's military as a joke. But behind the scenes, China has been quietly building a strategic infrastructure that the US can no longer ignore. China has provided Venezuela with advanced radar systems, anti-ship missiles, and satellite tracking stations. While Beijing publicly claims these are for national defense, US intelligence has raised alarms that these facilities are being used for signals intelligence, SIGINT, monitoring American naval movements in the Caribbean and tracking rocket launches from Cape Canaveral. Furthermore, China has secured long-term access to strategic ports on Venezuela's coast. These aren't naval bases in the traditional sense, not yet. But they are dual-use facilities that can be converted into staging grounds for the Chinese Navy in a matter of days. Imagine a conflict over Taiwan, where the US finds its own coastal waters patrolled by civilian Chinese vessels operating out of Venezuela. Imagine a world where the US has to divert half its Atlantic fleet just to monitor the dagger in the Caribbean. China doesn't need to invade the US. They just need to make the US unsafe in its own neighborhood. The vulnerability is not a lack of ships. It's the loss of the buffer zone that has protected America for 2 centuries. This brings us to the restructuring showdown. As of early 2026, the situation in Venezuela has reached a breaking point. The US has attempted to take control of Venezuela's oil exports to force a regime change, but they have hit a Chinese wall. China has made it clear that any restructuring of Venezuela's debt, or any new government, must respect Beijing's seniority as a creditor. They are using their economic leverage to ensure that no matter who sits in the presidential palace in Caracas, they will still be answering to Beijing. The US is realizing that they can no longer fix Venezuela without China's permission. The Monroe Doctrine doctrine, the 200-year-old policy that the US would not tolerate foreign interference in the Americas, is officially dead. China has replaced it with a Beijing doctrine of economic and technological vassalage. The vulnerability is not the threat of a failed state. It's the reality of a success state for Chinese interests. So, why is this victory so dangerous? Because it proves that China doesn't need to win a hot war to displace the United States. They just need to win the war of systems. In Venezuela, China has won. They have secured the energy, they have installed the surveillance, and they have established the strategic presence. They have turned a country that was once a pillar of the Western alliance into a forward operating base for a rival superpower. The next time you hear about a humanitarian crisis or political unrest in Venezuela, don't just look at the people in the streets. Look at the oil tankers heading to Ningbo. Look at the radars on the coast. Look at the fatherland cards in the hands of the hungry. Because in the end, Venezuela is not just a country in crisis. It is the trophy of a new era. If China can hold Venezuela, they have proven that they can project power into the heart of the Americas. They have proven that the US is no longer the master of its own hemisphere. The dangerous reality is that the victory in Venezuela isn't coming. It's already here. And the US is just now waking up to find that the dagger has already been placed.